Okay, so I am back. Going to showcase some more development work on the Space Sim. I'll put a link to the first video in the comments, or in the description rather. So a couple of quick things to point out. So not much has changed here, just the basic menu still. So biggest changes here. So first off, you can see we are not in space. We are landed. So actually not a lot visual again this time around quite yet. But the sim now starts in the launch configuration. So we're on the ground, landed, and it's going to go through the whole launch sequence and reach orbit. So it took quite a bit more work than I was anticipating, honestly, to get the launch to work properly. But there. So other things to point out. So still just the very basic cockpit. Again, just to kind of, this is just a placeholder. And I've got a couple of things. First off, I've got what every good spaceship should have, is a big red button. And then those two boxes on either side I'm actually going to be using as indicator lights, and I'll demonstrate how those work. So big thing here, for one, it's just a little bit of practice for me on using interactive items and creating buttons that you can press and lights that light up, that sort of thing. But then also it just gives some good feedback, because one thing I haven't put in yet is sound. So when you're in the launch sequence, because of, as you can see, there's not a lot of visual references right now, as I still have a very low res Earth, and I don't have any buildings put here. So without the visual references and without sound references, I realized it was really hard to tell when I was actually had initiated the launch sequence properly and was actually flying. So I have the big red button here, and what's going to happen is this is going to do two things depending on the phase of flight I'm in. So now I'm here on the ground. I press the big red button. The launch sequence is going to start, and this light over here will turn red to indicate that the launch sequence has started. It'll stay red all the way through the launch sequence, and then once the capsule has separated and I can begin controlling it, that'll turn green. And after that, the red button will control the retro sequence. So without further ado, let us press the big red button. All right, so yep, we got the red light indicating launch has started. Kind of look around, see if I can get a good reference. So what we're going to do is going to lift off, and then there's going to be a roll program initially to align the spaceship with the proper heading that it should launch on, and then it's going to start pitching. So the roll is kind of difficult to see with pitch program. So yeah, you can see the ground starting to fade away there, and you can see the pitch there, especially as I look to the side. So yeah, and then I got the sky, and you kind of see already the sky is starting to fade and get out into the stars. So that's happening a little faster than it should. So I'll have to go in and adjust some things to make that happen at a more normal pace, obviously. But it works. So it's kind of neat that when you're down at ground level, you don't see the stars, you see the sky, and then as you launch up, the sky itself starts to fade away, and the stars come out. So, but again, just a little too rapid. I don't have obviously an indicator in here about the height we're at, but we're not so high that the sky should be completely behind us at this point. But yeah, so now it's just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride. And of course, this is all modeled on Mercury Atlas launch profile. So it takes about 5 minutes or so to get up to orbit. It's about 300 and change seconds to make the full launch to orbit. All right, now the booster portion is finished, so we start a little bit more of a pitch over for the sustainer only portion of the launch. And this is all again based off Mercury Atlas and realistic values in terms of the whole pitch program, and everything is pretty much straight out of the books for Project Mercury. at this point in my life, I think I've amassed what is probably the largest individual private collection of Mercury documents anyone has. Maybe someone out there has me beat, but I kind of doubt it, to be fully honest with you. I've scoured the internet, and I've purchased some of the CDs that are out there and that sort of thing, and I have a trove of documents. So so I've got all that background information, but it can be kind of tough to dig some of that stuff out. Thankfully, I've got some good documents. And Mercury Atlas 6, aka Friendship 7, aka John Glenn's flight, of course, being as historic as it was, is extremely well documented, and a lot of those documents have survived the years, whereas some of the other flights, I'm sure they were just as well documented in their time, but nobody really preserved anything because they weren't as important. I'm sure they're still out there somewhere locked away in archives of NASA and that sort of thing. But in terms of being publicly available and out on the internet, nobody's really saved a lot of that stuff. There's some of the bigger documents, of course. There's every flight had a report that was an overall survey of the flight and things of that nature. A lot of those things are out there for every flight, but in terms of all the very detailed documentation, Mercury Atlas 6 has the lion's share of the stuff that survived. So. Okay, so now we've reached orbit and our capsule is separated from the booster, so we've got our green light there. And of course, we won't be able to see the booster. So I don't have that modeled yet, but I'll pitch around real quick to get us oriented. Now here, not much has changed that you're going to be able to see in the video. What has changed is I implemented some of the realistic control modes of the Mercury capsule. So right now I have the fly-by-wire and the manual proportional modes are modeled, which both work slightly different. So fly-by-wire, so there were two completely separate RCS systems in the Mercury. There are 4 separate modes total. So there's an automatic system with its own tank and thrusters, and then a manual system with its own tank and thrusters. Fly-by-wire is a manual control mode in that the astronaut would be able to control it with his hand controller, but it worked on the automatic RCS system. And the way that one worked, the automatic system had high power and low power thrusters. And with fly-by-wire, if the hand controller was moved more than 30% of travel, it would fire the low power thrusters, and then once it moved over 70% of travel, it would fire the high power thrusters. So that is all modeled here accurately, and it's what I'm flying right now. The other mode that I have modeled so far is manual proportional, which is on the manual system. And what that was kind of more what you might think you'd expect in terms of the more you moved the handle, the more thrust was produced, because the manual thrusters they had a valve, a proportional valve that would fire the same thruster, but it was essentially throttleable. So the more the valve opened, the more propellant went through, and the more power you got out of the thruster. So those are the 2 modes I modeled right now. But again, just from the video, you're just going to see the same thing. You're going to see pitching, rolling, yawing, that sort of thing. The modes that I have left to do are rate command and then the automatic system. So rate command is just however far the astronaut moved his hand controller, it would then command the capsule to move at a rate proportional to that. So, for example, if you move the hand controller all the way to full throw, the capsule would accelerate to a 12 degree a second movement, be it rolled or whatever, and then hold that movement. If you only move the controller halfway, it would be a 6 degree a second roll, and it would hold right there. So that's that, but I haven't modeled that yet. And then the last one is, of course, just the automatic system that would just command, whatever attitude was appropriate for the phase of flight that was in. So anyway, I've turned myself around now, and so now we've got the big red button, and now we've got the retro sequence. So again, this light over here is going to turn red when the retro sequence is active and green once all the retro rockets are fired. And again, just give me that feedback, because it takes a while to come back down, especially right now. I have done some modeling of the atmosphere in terms of drag and whatnot, but I have it turned off right now because I'm still tweaking it. So without any atmospheric drag, it takes a very long time to actually re-enter. So the feedback isn't very immediate. But here we go, press the big red button, boop. All right, now we got red, meaning our retro rockets are firing, and we are going to start slowing down, and of course the slowing down is going to cause our orbit to decay, and we're gonna head back to Earth. So and from there, again, so there's actually some tricky pieces in terms of modeling the landing and that sort of thing, in not having the game objects just bounce off the Earth and go flying in weird ways, and I haven't finished that yet. And other aspects of the reentry don't have parachutes and all that. There's lots still to build, so I won't bore you with that portion of the video. But rest assured, the retro rockets have fired, and the real spacecraft, the retro pack would have jettisoned, and all that good stuff, and we're on our way back to Earth. So yeah, so that's where it is, and I'm getting to the point now where really a lot of the visual aspects are probably going to start coming soon. Next, I'm gonna tackle fine-tuning the atmospheric drag, and once I have that done, then probably parachutes for reentry, modeling the forces at least, and perhaps abort and that sort of thing. But I'm getting to the point where pretty soon here I'm gonna have to start modeling the capsule interior and really starting to build on that. And that could be interesting because I have to teach myself quite a bit of Blender is the program I'm using for the 3D modeling, and it's not completely intuitive all the time. The user interface, it's a very powerful tool, but with things like that, 3D modeling, CAD, that sort of thing, the more powerful they are, the more complex they necessarily have to be. And I have a little bit of a learning curve with Blender. Oddly enough, I think I have more of a learning curve with Blender than with Unity, which is what I'm making all this programming in. Seems a little more straightforward. I get into Blender and I don't really know what I'm doing. I haven't been able to figure things out just on my own, so I'm going to have to find some online tutorials and work through it to kind of teach myself Blender a little bit more. And I'm never very great about sticking to those tutorials, but it needs to be done. So anyway, so there we are, flying in space, hurtling back towards Earth. Whee! Spinning around. So yeah, so that's that.